Welcome to today's Explainer. We are going to do a deep dive into one of the most profoundly misunderstood figures in literally all of human history. Today, we're reframing the story of Eve. Too often, she's just reduced to this simple tale of failure or kind of used as a cautionary footnote. But when we unpack the original text, it reveals a completely different reality. Her story is actually this incredibly powerful narrative of human dignity, equal partnership, and honestly unending grace. Let's get right into it.
Genesis 3:20 gives us a really striking starting point. It says, Adam named his wife Eve because she would become the mother of all the living. Now, the Hebrew name used here is Hava, which literally translates to life or living one. And that's absolutely crucial because it establishes her ultimate identity right from the very beginning. She isn't defined by that tragedy in the garden, right? Her name anchors her as the literal mother of all living things. She's intricately tied to the very concept of life itself.
So, here's our roadmap for today. We'll be tracking three distinct theological acts. 1, creation and dignity. 2, the fall and sin. And 3, the promise of grace.
Let's move right into our first act, creation and dignity. This is where we establish Eve's fundamental identity. Looking at Genesis 1:27, we see she is definitely not an afterthought or some secondary character. No, she is made equally in the image of God. Eve shares the exact same dignity, the same glory, and the same responsibility as man. There is absolutely zero hierarchy in their creation value. They both perfectly reflect the divine image to the world. And the way she's created brilliantly illustrates the nature of their bond. Being formed from Adam's rib, he famously declares her bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. This specific phrasing was designed to show a perfectly equal and intimate relationship. They stood together naked, but completely unashamed. It's a picture of profound unity and vulnerability, with absolutely no fear and no superiority.
Now here's where it gets really fascinating. The original Hebrew term used to describe Eve's role is azar kenegdo. For centuries, this has often been simply, and honestly kind of poorly, translated into English as helper. But digging into the original language completely redefines her position in this narrative.
Culturally, we've inherited this huge misconception of Eve as a mere assistant, a subordinate who just hands the tools over. But the true biblical meaning of ezer kenegdo translates way closer to an equal partner standing face to face. It is a term of incredible strength. She's a vital, highly capable coworker, meant to look her partner in the eye as an absolute equal. It's a total game changer for how we read the text.
Okay, we pivot now to Act 2, the fall and sin.
To deconstruct exactly how temptation works, we really have to look at the serpent's strategy in the garden, because it's actually a fascinating psychological breakdown that happens in 3 exact steps. Step 1 is doubt, just planting a simple little question about God's word. Did God really say that? Then step 2 is distortion, subtly twisting the truth to make that forbidden fruit look incredibly appealing and logically desirable. And finally, step 3 is distrust. That's the complete break in the relationship where Eve, and remember, Adam was right there with her, decide they actually know better than their creator.
And that leads us to the true nature of what actually transpired in Eden. See, sin isn't merely about breaking some arbitrary rule or eating a piece of fruit. It is the tragic collapse of our fundamental trust toward God. The physical action of taking that fruit, that was really just the physical symptom of a massive internal relational breakdown.
Moving to our final section now, Act 3, the promise of grace.
This is where the narrative gets incredibly hopeful. God's continuous action in response to human error is, it's immediate. At the very moment of temptation, we have the fall. But even before any punishment is fully realized, God promises a Messiah. Then, before their exile from the garden, he provides garments of skin to cover their shame. And finally, decades later, he grants them a completely new beginning through the birth of their son, Seth.
Let's zoom in on that immediate promise in Genesis 3:15. Theologians call this the proto-evangelium, or the first gospel. It's literally the very first promise of salvation in the text, declaring that the offspring of the woman will crush the serpent's head. Just imagine the weight of that for a second. Eve's own lineage is promised to strike the ultimate final blow to the very evil that deceived her. Her line is literally the vehicle for humanity's redemption.
So there's a really fascinating dynamic at play here. Yes, God definitely holds humanity accountable for the sin. There are real heavy consequences to the fall. But God also personally provides coverings, those garments of skin. He directly addresses their immediate shame and vulnerability.
This is such a profound symbol that human failure never, ever exhausts God's grace. He covers them lovingly right before sending them out into the world.
And what's amazing is that Eve herself recognizes this grace. Fast forward to Genesis 4:25. This is after the heartbreaking, incredibly violent loss of her son Abel. She gives birth to Seth and declares, "God has granted me another child in place of Abel." What a beautiful confession of faith. Eve acknowledges that God is continuously granting fresh starts. Even out there in a broken world, outside of Eden, the mother of all living continues to experience, recognize, and literally name the grace of God.
So, what does this all mean for us? How do we apply this ancient text to our modern lives? Well, first, we need to recognize our own patterns of temptation. Where are those areas of doubt and distortion slowly creeping into your own life? Second, we absolutely must hold firmly to the truth, anchoring ourselves so we don't fall into that same trap of distrust. And third, we are called to be an Ezer Kenegdo. We should actively choose to be strong, equal, face-to-face partners who encourage and build up those around us, rather than tearing them down.
I'm going to leave you with a provocative question to ponder today. Will you live your life defined by your past failures, or will you step forward today as one made perfectly in the image of God? Because, just like Eve, your story isn't over just because of a mistake. You are beautifully made, possessing immense dignity, and you are covered by unending grace. Step forward into that identity today. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll see you next time.